Nothing Personal starts in 30 seconds. It's just business. This is Nothing Personal.
Here you go. Here you go.
Array, as in an array of viewing options, as in you, the audience, has an array of viewing options. Do you want to watch Nothing Personal live at 8 a.m. on the Nothing Personal with David Samson YouTube channel? Do you want to wait until 8:15 a.m. in case of technical difficulties? Or do you try another show? Do you watch at 10 o'clock on DraftKings Network? Or are you just listening and you have no idea how I could even start a show by using the word array? Except that was always going to be the word of the day. Because the biggest news out of the sports world and the business world is that you all win. The consumer has finally gotten its way. Celebrate good times. Let's go full cool in the gang. For $6.99, you can watch any game you want. I have a little tear in my eye. Hold on. I'm very sad that it finally happened, that we're able to deliver to the audience their dream. You see, Diamond's trying to get out of bankruptcy in what I call the biggest story of this coming year, and it really is. And they've got a new plan. Now, it's called Diamond Sports Group. You know that they've rebranded as FD is the name of all their channels. And here's the deal. You want to watch an NBA team? No problem. An NHL team? Heck yeah. Click, pay $6.99 per game. This is what everyone talked about. The whole problem with the cable industry and the reason that people are cutting the cord is you're tired of paying for stuff you don't want. Teams want to get paid for games that you don't want. RSNs used to pay teams for games it didn't want because they got paid by cable companies to give the channel to them so you could all have a choice of things you don't want. And you got tired of it. And you cried from the mountaintop and said, please, I'd rather pay per month, cut the cord and get Hulu, get Netflix, get YouTube, get Amazon Prime, get Max. Get them all. And then you realize, well, wait a minute, this turns out not to be cheaper than cable. So then the company said, no problem, we'll do some bundling for you. And you said, well, that sounds familiar. That seems a lot like the tiered system from cable. But you were assured, no, it's not. This is a brand new world that's all about you, the consumer. So then the consumer said, well, what about going even more micro? And the company said, well, that's sort of like pay-per-view. We do pay-per-view for events. I guess we could maybe do pay-per-view for a series or an episode. That would make you very happy, wouldn't it? It's a 10-episode series like Bad Sisters starts today on Apple TV Plus. You get Apple TV Plus, you get Bad Sisters. It comes out once a week in theory. You don't like the series, stop buying it. But would you be okay paying $3.99 for every episode that came out? I guess you better have a good series, like you better have a good team. Like this weekend, I think you'd all pay to watch the Chiefs and the Bills, but are you going to pay to watch a crap team when the Pistons play the Hawks? Now in Detroit and Atlanta, maybe, probably not. Outside of that, no chance, toilet pants. Let's do the math, which I'm sure you've already done because it's been 4 minutes. Although I have no idea how long it's been since I don't actually know when we started, since my brain is so used to 8 a.m. Eastern. $6.99 a game, 82 games. What do you think that is? Just here, I'm going to help you. You do 81, you do 82 times, it's $7. 7 times 2 is 14, carry the 1. 7 times 8 is 56 plus 1 is 57. 574. Did you get that math too? $574 a year to watch your favorite team. Are you in? Is that because you pay $100 a month for cable? So to you, it's, well, that's not so bad. Are you joking? This is what they came up with. But let's tell you exactly what the CEO said. The addition of single game pricing allows fans to catch their local NBA and NHL teams on a game-by-game basis, enhancing the flexibility of our offering. This is yet another example of how we remain committed to delivering an array of viewing options and features to make it easier for our viewers to watch their favorite teams. Wow, is that a bunch of horse hockey? Let's see what I don't agree with in this little PR statement. Now you can catch your teams on a game-by-game basis. That's true, except when I had the channel, I could catch every game, but I digress. Another example of how we remain committed to delivering an array of viewing options. So what are the viewing options? That I can do it on the app. I had that already. That I can watch highlights 10 seconds after they actually happen for free on X or various other platforms. I can follow along game by play, follow the game cast, and then get video updates later. That's a viewing option. I can download and subscribe. That's a viewing option. I guess this is another one, game by game, true. Easier for our viewers to watch their favorite teams. You know what was really easy? When you had an actual guide, you had a platform, and then you could see that your game was on the same channel every single time. That was easy. Things got a little complicated when you had a split between MSG and Channel 9 and then Channel 472. Hey, is this game on Channel 69? It's like being a Yankee fan in New York right now. Your head could explode because Yankee games are on 10 different platforms and you don't know which day's what. So you just have to try all of them and buy all of them. Teams cannot be happy with this new array of options. Can you imagine if the TV network, Diamond, went to a team like the Pistons and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pay you a minimum guarantee of $20 million per year for your games. But we are then going to share revenue with you. So we'll see how popular your games are. And the more people who buy your games on a game-by-game basis, the more money we'll give you. Do you think teams like that? All the conversations we've had about fixed versus variable, both expenses, and then guaranteed versus non-guaranteed revenue. How do you make a budget when you don't know for sure? Because let me ask you all, you think baseball, this is what teams or what the league wants for you for baseball? Do you want this? $6.99 for a Tuesday night game. Raise your hand if you're in the middle of June. I don't care if you're a Yankee fan, Red Sox fan, Cubs fan, or Royals or Marlins, or I don't care who. Raise your hand. A random Tuesday. You in? Rockies, Yankees. $6.99. Except they'd probably charge more, but let's pretend they just charge $6.99. Point and click. Split the cost maybe with your buddies. Have them come over. Hey, Venmo me $1. Let's watch this game. My team is about to lose 100 games. I'm not watching another contest. I don't care who they're playing. It's a disaster. I don't like using that word. Cut that out, Coca. I don't even know if we have the ability to cut it out. Sarah's in the chair today. Sarah, let's start that again. 4869. This is an outrage for teams that they have to actually live in a world where you are being fed a line that this is for your benefit to be able to buy on a game-by-game basis. This isn't going to work. Mark my words. As a matter of fact, Sarah, if you could add to the document an extra wait to see. Wait to see is when we tell you something's going to happen. And if it does, we'll revisit it. And if it doesn't, we'll revisit it. I'm going to give you an official wait to see that Diamond can try to do this game-by-game basis in baseball, and baseball will be a hard no. There will be no game-by-game opportunity for you to purchase through Diamond for MLB games this season. Wait to see. What I love is Arte Moreno. He is the owner of the Anaheim Angels of Los Angeles. And he had a free agent signing yesterday and then a quote that was a chef's kiss. So he has a GM named Perry Managian, and they have a team. They had Trout and Ohtani, and they've never been able to build a team around those guys. No playoff appearances. They think they can be the Dodgers, but they can't. At least the Padres think they can be the Dodgers and sign players and make the playoffs. The Angels just stink. Wasted Mike Trout's career along with his injuries. Wasted Ohtani's first 6 years before he became a free agent. But now, apparently, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim have decided this is their moment. They brought in Kyle Hendricks from Chicago. They've got a great young core. Sign him as a free agent. He's a Chicago Cubs castaway. He's a number 7 starter. Give him a couple million, bring him in, and then call it veteran leadership. They did it again yesterday with the former catcher from the Braves. You may know him from your team, Travis d'Arnaud. Really good player. But he's a complimentary. He's not an everyday catcher. He got his option not picked up by the Braves. And he became a free agent and was signed to this crazy deal. $12 million for 2 years. That may sound like chump change. What's the big deal? But for a backup catcher, the going rate a decade ago was $1 million. I guess we're now up to $6 million if you can provide veteran leadership. And I'm not in any way impugning Travis d'Arnaud as a player. I'm merely saying $12 million for 2 years guaranteed seems a little heavy, but we know why now. Because Arte Moreno has come out and said, there was an article by Bill Shaken. I got to tell you, this is a good quote by Moreno. We're going to be working a little harder on streaming. There are just so many platforms now. Have you ever heard? That's what I think an octogenarian would sound like who's trying to sound cool. And this happens to me when I'm with Coca and Sarah before the show, and I try to sound cool, and I'm merely in my 50s, but they're not, obviously, and they know way more than I do and have heard of way more things and are way more hip. But sometimes I try to say things, and that's when I have illiterate alliterations. That's when I mix my metaphors, and that's when I get made fun of. I can picture Arte Moreno right now. It's sort of like the original board of MLB.com. If you know, you know. There's a bunch of old white people trying to figure out the internet when it was first starting. And it was funny, those board meetings that we had in baseball where we'd hear from all of these older owners. This is the future. And they didn't understand one thing about what it was, which is fine. But Arte Moreno said that he views the new TV landscape. Now, keep in mind, Arte Moreno and the Angels cut a deal similar to what I had arranged with the Marlins before Derek Jeter went a different direction and ended up going the same direction for less money, actually. But again, I slightly digress, where you get a rights fee from your regional sports network, but you also get an equity interest, which means you get a guaranteed amount of money per year given to you for your games. And then if there's any profit that the channel has at the end of the year, you own 25% of the channel and they distribute the profits and you get 25% of the profits. So you get your minimum guarantee and then you get a percentage of the upside. In the old days, the RSNs were spitting off a ton of cash, which is why the Yankees and Yes Network and the Red Sox and NESN It's why they had so much cash available to them and why their payrolls were so high, because they were operating at such a profit and they owned the network. So imagine if you get $30 million a year in rights fees, but then the network has $100 million of profit. You get 25 million of that by owning 25%. So you get your rights fee plus your equity distribution, it's called. When we did those deals, the regional networks were worth something. Now they're worth nothing. Literally nothing. They have no profit. Their equity is worth zero. Their debt far exceeds their equity. That's called, wait for it, bankruptcy, which Diamond has been in for what feels like years, but I think is under 2 years. So what Arte Moreno did, along with several of the other baseball teams, is they said to their partner, Diamond, all right, here's what we'll do. We'll keep our equity interest in you, but we're going to really open up the flexibility for how we deliver our games. We'll have an over-the-air component. We'll have a streaming platform component. We can do a game-by-game component. We're going to get rid of the blackouts. We're going to do all sorts of things differently because you're not giving us either the rights fee that we contracted to or the equity distribution that we expected to have because the channel is not profitable anymore. We've seen teams do this offseason. And frankly, they started last offseason when MLB started producing. And what we've learned is Bill DeWitt of the Cardinals actually told you the TV revenue is down. You've heard owners and presidents say, we're excited about the reach, which is code word for we're not excited about the money, so we can't say that, but we have to say it's exciting that so many more people can enjoy our product. Then Commissioner Rob Manfred comes out and says, listen, we can produce games for our teams, but there is short-term pain here. He's not talking to you, the fans. He's talking to the union. So the union is aware that there is going to be an issue with payrolls, overall payroll, overall contractual obligations to players. Arte Moreno, for whatever reason, believes that he's playing chess to the rest of the world's checkers and that his TV revenue is going to increase. So he sends out Perry Menagin and says, we're buyers. And then they sign Hendricks and Darno. I just find the whole thing untenable, funny, sad, pathetic, disingenuous, and overall a poor plan. I think the worst thing you could ever do in your business life or in your personal life, don't throw good time after bad. In your business life, don't throw good money after bad. It's a very hard skill to have. Understanding when it's time to fold or hold or contract or expand. The reason why it's hard is that you have a dream, you have a vision of what you thought was going to happen, and you have a timeline in which that vision is supposed to happen. And when it doesn't happen in that timeline, you either delude yourself into thinking, oh, it's just a matter of time, or you recognize the fact that there is no amount of time that would make your plan come to fruition. Knowing the difference is a super important skill, and it's not had by many. And you all know, although you could pretend that you don't, but you know if you have the skill. What do you do when you've made an investment in something and you have no choice but to say to yourself, I can't go further? Well, that's easy. You have no choice. You close down your company. You're not going to win the argument with your significant other. You know it. You have two choices. Keep arguing, knowing that you can't win, and it's pure idiocy and waste of time, or stop arguing and give in and say you're sorry. You all know that both paths are well-traveled. Tampa Bay has been on the stadium path for so many years. I'm ready to call it decades now. We talked to you yesterday about Tropicana Field and Tampa. We've talked to you throughout, nothing personal, post-hurricane. And I told you that I don't see a scenario under which Tropicana Field is ready for 2025, and they're not going to be. A study got completed yesterday that it cannot be repaired for next season. The Rays must play somewhere else. Baseball knew this the morning of the hurricane, after the hurricane. Tampa, the Rays did not want to tell you. They stayed quiet, but they knew also. St. Petersburg, where Tropicana Field is, they commissioned a group to come in and assess the damage. And they gave a 400-page plus report yesterday. And here's the summary. Put your head between your legs and kiss your tuchus au revoir, because we've got a problem bigger than losing the moon, Houston. $55.7 million. That's what it will cost to repair Tropicana Field. But don't you worry, we can have it done for 2026. Oh, by the way, sorry, that doesn't include all sorts of other costs. So I'm sorry, what's the $55.7 million? Does that get us ready to play? Not exactly. It won't return Tropicana Field to the state in which it was in, which is a state of disrepair, but it will return it to the ability to be used again. 55.7. There's a rule when you get a report about what costs will be to repair damage, because I've gotten a lot of reports on damage to Marlins Stadium and Marlins Park, as it was being built, after it was open, while we were running it. It's like getting an estimate to redo your bathroom. You're best served to multiply it by 3, and when they tell you to be done in 4 weeks, you multiply that by 4. So it'll be 16 weeks, and it'll be about 3 times the bid that they're giving you. Overruns, issues that come up. You better read the contract with your, what's it called, Sarah? Contractor, thank you. You better, God, you are on it. It's like your brain is right there with us, even though we're totally discombobulated this morning. Of course, people listening still don't know what that means. Unless you listen right at 9, right when it's released, and we won't get it released by 9 a.m. Eastern. How much time do we have left, Sarah? Am I still good? Do we have to go to break? Because I got more to say on Tropicana Field. I have no idea when we started this show. Hi, my name is David. I have to be done with the show soon. A, doing Le Batard Live today, but B, I'm going to the dentist. I have a cavity. And yes, I'm going to talk to you about it for a minute because I'm anxious. I haven't had a cavity since before my bar mitzvah. Who gets a cavity in your third score? And then I've got a show right after my cavity. Am I going to numb? Will it be numb? I assume they're going to nominate me. Let's get back to Tropicana Field. You think for 1 second St. Petersburg is going to spend $55.7 million to get Tropicana Field back to where they can play, knowing that the Rays are only going to play there for the 2 more years, maybe 3 more years? So really, that's an investment that has no chance of paying off, because you will never be able to generate the revenue that St. Petersburg will be able to in any way collect. The vigorish between what insurance will pay and what they will have to add as their deductible and then premium going forward for the next building. Anyone aware of how you do that when you are a community, a city council, or a team? You don't. There is a line item in the budget for the new Tampa Stadium that's due to open in 2028 called insurance. That's a very big deal when you're building a ballpark, especially in Florida, where bad stuff happens every single season. And I don't mean on the field. So when you are budgeting insurance, you have to argue with the public, with the representatives of the public who you elect. How much of the insurance will you cover? How much will you cover? How much will it cost? What are we exactly insuring? Remember, Tropicana Field, only this year, St. Petersburg lowered their insurance coverage because the premiums were too high. They were paying like $1 million a year, and they cut it to $250,000 to save money, and then a hurricane hit. That's a small bit of irony. total despondency in Tampa. So here's what you're going to do. You are going to take that report and you are going to file it in the circular file. Because if you are the Tampa Bay Rays, you're not getting into a fight with St. Petersburg about refurbing Tropicana Field. And if you are understanding the politics of St. Petersburg, where there's a new council elected in last week who doesn't want the deal anyway, they're not going to want to pay an extra tens of millions of dollars for your old field and still be willing to put in what you need them into the new ballpark. It is a total nightmare for the Rays and for baseball. But the way baseball is, you solve the most immediate problem and then you worry about the rest later. I assure you that what baseball is focused on only is where the Rays will play in 2025. Their position will be simply, hey, Tampa will talk to us. We'll figure out what we'll do after 25. We got to take care of 25 now. We got to know where the Aths are going to play. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, I'm going to review the must-see movie of the year, and we are now November 13th. This is episode 1168, regular episodes of Nothing Personal. I'm not sure that I will recommend a movie more highly than what I'm about to review. And then we're going to revisit something that happened in baseball yesterday that I promise will make you smile. We're going to try to go to break now, and I'm not sure that we'll come back. Hello? Are we back, Sarah? Yes? Hey! Welcome back. It's David Samson, Nothing Personal. Every day, 8 a.m. live. Every day. We don't miss a day. I do watch a movie every single day. Coca called me about a week ago. He said, David, I got one for you. And I love Coca's recommendations because he's earned the credibility where he does not recommend a lot to me. And when he does, and the first one he ever recommended was a series called Lovesick. And I didn't really know where his recommendation was and whether he knew me well enough. I watched Lovesick and I absolutely loved it. And it likely would make my top 10 all-time TV series, which is a list I'm working on, by the way. And he calls me up and says, David, you got to watch this documentary. It's called The Remarkable Life of Ibelin. And I'd never heard of it. And he said, you're not going to watch it unless I tell you, because it's about gamers and you're not a gamer. I said, I'm totally a gamer, Coca. He's like, no, I don't mean like going out and having fun. I mean, when you're locked in and playing video games. And that's true. I play Mattel Electronics football and I play Centipede. The occasional Galactica. Hi. Don't worry. We're fine. But I don't do like World of Warcraft. I don't even know what that is. So let me review this movie and let me start with the group of you who are not gamers. This is a movie about a boy named Matt Steen. Matt Steen is a Norwegian boy who has a problem. Not that he's addicted to gaming, which he is. He has a physical disability, not a mental disability, and it manifests itself in a degenerative way that by definition puts you in the mood to be sad. But so far, it's your standard ordinary, how sad it is that this person has a disability and he's trying to live his life. You know, I've seen this before. You've never seen a documentary like this. They use animation, the filmmakers do, in a way that I have never seen. They tell the story of Matt Steen and what it is to be in a parasocial community, in a gaming community, in a way that you don't need to be in a gaming community to understand, to agree with, to appreciate, to crave yourself. Can you imagine that you leave this movie, which is 103 minutes? You will be thanking me for the 103 minutes. You will need tissues. If you do not have tears rolling down your eyes at different parts of this movie, then you really are the robot that Dan claims I am, which I'm not. Just play that character. This is a special documentary that will be shortlisted for an Academy Award. It will be nominated for an Academy Award. I have not seen a better documentary this year. I haven't seen a better movie this year. And it's not because I have empathy or feel for the character, which I do, or the parents, or can appreciate the parents, and which I can. It's actually different. It's the quality of the movie making. It's a brilliant movie about a subject that will automatically cause you to have a conversation with your coworkers, your friends, your family, your children. That's how important it is. And I don't say it often. So I really hope that you watch it and then get to me at David P. Samson on X, which seems to be a flailing platform, or David P. Samson on Instagram, or at davidsamsonpodcast.com. Just find me. Tell me about the remarkable life of Ibelin. The baseball subject that I want to talk to you about is the Arizona Diamondbacks and Jordan Montgomery. He's the former player he's a current player. He's the former player who had Scott Boras as his agent. He was one of the Boras 4 from last season who signed late and didn't get the deals they want. And then Montgomery fired him. And then Montgomery stunk. And then about a month and a half ago, do you remember the owner of the Diamondbacks, this guy, Kendrick? You can go back to a show, but to make a segment shorter, Kendrick is the name. And he said, what a horrible decision to invest that money in a guy who performed as poorly as Jordan Montgomery. He went nuclear on Jordan Montgomery. Then a few weeks later, Jordan Montgomery picked up his player option because he had no other option at $22.5 million. No one would have paid him that. So that was part of the Boras contract that he negotiated with the Diamondbacks. So Jordan Montgomery picks up the player option, and I told you on October 2nd, wait to see. Jordan Montgomery won't start a game in Arizona. It's a guarantee. His career in Arizona is over. They cannot bring him back. So we found out that at the GM meetings, the GM of the Diamondbacks, Mike Hazen, has made Jordan Montgomery available to all the 29 other teams. That's not big news. That was obvious. Here's the coolest part. The Diamondbacks said that they will eat as much of the contract as required, according to Jeff Passan, in order to move him. So Passan has Montgomery at the top of his list of people who are going to be traded. I don't think we needed the Diamondbacks to say they'd eat part of the 22.5 to put him at the top of anyone's trade list, because we know, as fans of Nothing Personal, you know, he was either going to get traded or he was going to get released. There was no chance that he was going to show up for spring training and have a locker inside the clubhouse. And they can talk all they want that we met with him and he's very accountable and he understands that he had a bad year. Forget it. Kendrick can come out and say, well, I probably shouldn't have said that. Of course, we'd welcome back Jordan Montgomery and we want him to be a part of our team going forward. Forget it. He's not going to say it either. The minute those statements came out from Kendrick, his career in Arizona was done. So it's not as though what the Diamondbacks did yesterday, through sources to Jeff Passan, was lowering leverage, because all 29 teams saw what Kendrick did October 2nd and immediately said, hey, we'll take Montgomery, pay his salary, pay him down to the minimum. And by the way, we will give you a non-prospect plus a bag of your favorite balls and maybe an autographed bat from the team mascot. The Diamondbacks are shopping Montgomery to all 29 teams, and they don't want to release him because when you release a player, you have to pay their entire salary. And then when another team signs him as a free agent, they only have to pay the minimum. So you only get relief of $750,000 out of the $22.5 million. So what the Diamondbacks are doing is calling the 29 teams and saying, how much of his salary would you pay? If I'm a team looking to trade for Montgomery, I would say $770,000. And then the Diamondbacks would say, well, if we're going to pay that amount of money, we're going to need some good prospects for you. And then I'd say, okay, give me a list. And if anyone on the list was someone who we thought would even get a cup of coffee at the big leagues, nope, we're not trading you that prospect. Why? Because we know very well you have to release him. And we know because we've tampered that we've told his new agent, hey, we've got a spot for Jordan in our rotation. He can sign with us right now and be in our rotation. No bullpen, no nothing. Number 2 starter. That's music to Jordan Montgomery's ears because that's what he wants. He wants to go back to being a starter who's beloved by a team, and the team can get their hands on a starter for cheap, which is really hard to do. So all in all, the D-backs just have to swallow hard and know they're going to lose about $22.5 million on Jordan Montgomery. That'll teach you, Ken. Nothing. Personal pick of the day. Let's talk about that for a few minutes, if you don't mind. We had the Sixers plus 1.5 over the Knicks. The Sixers stink. The blue court of the Emirates Cup is impossible to watch. I watched the game on TNT last night. It was dizzying to watch. It was incredible to watch the fact that Embiid and George I don't think they had played together all year because George is new. It's hard to get any sort of chemistry, but you look around at the Sixer team and you just think to yourself, wow, that's a closed window with not a lot of success when it was open. The Sixers lost the game. They've got another game tonight, and we are watching that very closely. They are stayed home, back-to-back home games. They're playing the undefeated Cavaliers. Do you know the Cavaliers, I believe, have the best start since the Warriors when the Warriors won 97 games a couple of years ago, which was amazing. They went like 97 and minus 15, which is not easy to do for a season. Joel Embiid said, hey, I may play tomorrow. This is him after the game. The same guy who said he'll never play back-to-back games. He said, hey, you never know. I may play. I may have been trolling you the whole time. If Joel Embiid plays tonight, I will never again listen to one thing Daryl Morey or any player ever says. I think on principle alone, you can't have Embiid play back-to-back after everything that's been said and done in Philadelphia and all of his injuries. I need a cheapie here, Coca and Sarah. Sorry. I don't necessarily love doing 2 weights a season a day because that causes a problem in the document, but let's do it and we can revisit it tomorrow. Wait to see. This is official. Embiid does not play tonight against the Cavaliers. So much attention on injuries as the NBA heads into this Emirates Cup. And it's really quite something that last night we had Emirates Cups games. Great game, by the way. We'll talk about the Warriors and the Mavs in a minute. But then tonight and tomorrow, regular season. Last night was in-season tourney regular season. And then Friday, it's back to in-season tourney regular season. Got that? What else happened last night that interested me greatly? Eric Spoelstra had what he called was a mental error. Do you remember in 1993? Let me see. 1993 is 24-7, about 31 years ago. So there are 48% who were not alive for this. So you may not know this. Chris Webber was a player before he was an announcer. He went to Michigan. They played in the national championship game, and he called a timeout when they didn't have any timeouts left, and it cost them the game because it's a technical foul. And you don't see that happen very often. In the NBA, it's very different. When I grew up, it was Red Halsman and then 2 guys next to him, and that's it. There's now 2 rows of assistant coaches in the NBA. It is mind-boggling. It's such an overstaffing that you've got people in charge of when should you challenge. You have people in charge of the clipboard, people in charge of the Gatorade, people in charge of the offense, people in charge of the defense, people in charge of the minutes, people in charge of the post-game spread, people in charge of heads, shoulders, knees, and toes. They're all sitting there. The Miami Heat are playing the Pistons. Eric Spoelstra watches his team give up a dunk on an inbounds play with like a second left that ties the game. And he's so furious, he runs on the court and does his patented, if you're watching this, then you'll see me do it. And it's so Spoelstra. When something bad happens, he puts his finger in a T to make a timeout and then shoves it down. So he does timeout and then shoves his hand and pushes it down while walking on the court to stand in the huddle with the myriad assistant coaches while the players sit on the bench waiting for the coach to come by with 10 seconds left to give the inimitable words of wisdom. All right, guys, keep pushing. Hustle out there. You're doing great. Well, the Heat didn't have a timeout, and none of the 69 assistants told him. Now, Spoelstra did the right thing by taking the heat for it, which he should, and taking the blame for it, but it cost them the game. If I'm Mickey Arison, the owner of the Heat, I have a very simple solution. I'm going to hire one extra assistant to be in charge of timeouts. I think like coaches in the NBA need a Facebook at this point in order to keep track of everyone on their staff. It's literally absurd. I also watched the tribute to Klay Thompson. The Warriors beat the Mavericks. Klay Thompson is a Maverick. The Warriors beat the Mavericks by 3. I was far more interested in the pregame ceremony where they honored Klay Thompson. It's always a tricky thing figuring out who to honor and who not to. What type of honor should you give? We used to have a schedule of, we traded so many players that players would inevitably come back as active players to play against us. Any sort of acknowledgement, it goes from the public announcer. Then you have the possibility of a video tribute, the possibility of just a Jumbotron tribute in words, the possibility of a gift, maybe just ignoring it altogether. There's myriad ways you can treat a player coming back. Klay Thompson is obviously one of the legs of the tripod that led to all those titles in Golden State. And I always find it interesting, the multiple minute standing ovation that the fans give the player. Hey, we definitely didn't want you to come back because you're overpaid and you're past your prime and you stink now. But we are so appreciative of the job you did. We are going to give you all sorts of love. And we're going to take a photo of you in a Dallas Mavericks jersey. I always was upset to celebrate a player when we would sign a veteran past his prime because that's what we could afford. And then we'd go back to the city where the veteran came from and the veteran would be honored, like Luis Gonzalez, great guy. We signed him and he was obviously, you remember him more as a Diamondback, or you should. World Series winning hit off Mariano Rivera. Or that was Craig Counsell. Luis Gonzalez may have scored the run. That's 23 years ago. Give me a break. But it's strange when you go back to where these players came from and you're like, ooh, I'm a little late with this player. I wonder whether the Mavericks feel that about Klay Thompson. Like, not ideal. I did not give you what the actual pick of the day is. Wednesday, the Sacramento Kings are 7.5-point favorites over the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns are without Kevin Durant, as you recall. We are back to 9 games under at 156 and 165, and we are going with the Kings, laying the points. We got to talk about Brian Flores. We have to. Brian Flores is the defensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings, a phenomenal defensive mind, former head coach of the Dolphins. Brian Flores was fired by the Dolphins, as you may recall. Brian Flores was the head coach for Tua back when Tua first started. You may recall earlier this year when things went public of the rotten relationship between Flores and Tua, where Flores' abilities as a coach were impugned time after time, minute after minute, quote after quote. Flores did a good job of responding to that. He said it hurt, which it did. But he said he's moved on. He's grown. This is the Brian Flores who's currently suing the NFL and several of its teams because he felt he was discriminated against in the head coaching hiring process. He is the face of a lawsuit that was joined by a bunch, but not all minority candidates. It is a losing lawsuit, no matter how much the underlying facts happen to be true. From a lawsuit standpoint, it's a losing lawsuit. My biggest issue with the lawsuit from the beginning was if you're filing this and you're Brian Flores, it's scorched earth. You cannot expect to have a career in the NFL. And for whatever reason, he got another job. Do you remember when the Pittsburgh Steelers, he was there with them last year in 22? He is now what some would call the top defensive coordinator in the league. He went on an Adam Schefter podcast, and Adam must not have any sort of journalism background other than as an insider. The NFL has people call him and give him information. Because how do you interview Brian Flores and let him talk and not ask him? Now, let me actually be fair to Adam. I'm going to do a mea culpa here, Sarah. I only read a summary of the podcast. I didn't listen to the full interview. So let's think the best. It's a random Thursday morning, Wednesday morning, Thursday. It's a random 13th of November. It's Wednesday. Thank you. Thank you. Let's pretend that we're going to assume the nicest and best and that Adam Schefter did ask. I need to find out what the answer is. But the question that you'd have to ask is, you want to be a head coach again, which is what Brian Flores talked about in this podcast. He literally said, I certainly want to be a head coach in this league again. Well, here's a question. Will you drop the lawsuit? The lawsuit is still active. What team is going to hire a head coach who is currently suing the league in which they're in? It is bad enough that he gets to be a defensive coordinator, which I completely disagree with. He should not be allowed to coach in the league until he drops the suit or the suit is settled. That suit is still pending. He could end up in an arbitration before an arbitrator, guess who that would be, as a current coach, alleging that he can't get jobs as a head coach. I just view it as a strategic misstep. He said, for me personally, I think being a head coach is something that I would love to do again. Brian, if you would love to do it again, then who's advising you? Do you have an agent? Do you have anyone in your life who's willing to tell you the truth about why you have no chance to be a head coach, having nothing to do with your color, nothing to do with your ability? Maybe you should just be thankful you're a defensive coordinator and try to be a defensive coordinator for the rest of your career. You think that he'd win? Do you think he thinks, hey, I'm going to win the lawsuit and then they're going to give me a head coaching job? Guess what? Doesn't work that way. When you sue somebody and win, they're angry and they will be retaliatory against you. They'll pretend they're not. They'll interview you, but you'll never get hired. People don't forgive that, nor do they forget it, nor should they. Why should anyone? I'm all in. You want to sue someone? Have at it. But do you want to live in a country where your Secretary of Defense is a TV host? Do you want to live in a country where it doesn't matter? You can be sued and then still responsible to not just employ that person, but to be friends with that person, to appreciate that person. I believe that there ought to be way stiffer and harder consequences for people's actions, because maybe that's our only chance to have behavior changed as a deterrent. Maybe it's the only thing left. Maybe people are too used to doing something and having it not reverberate back to them. Maybe people are too used to making decisions, saying, oh, if it works, great. If it doesn't work, no problem. I'll be fine. It's not the world I live in, not the world I grew up in, and not the world that I presented to my children as their father. You have to, and I got this from my family, from my mom, from my parents. There are consequences to your actions. You can't just wish them away, pretend you didn't do something. You own it, you did it, and if you can never be a head coach again, that's got to be a decision you made before you filed the original lawsuit. But now you're going on Adam Schefter and say, oh, by the way, notwithstanding any actions to the contrary, I'm ready to be a head coach. Sorry, Brian, it's not going to happen. Teams will look at you and say, good luck. It's just business. Thanks for hanging in there with us. If you know, you know. This is nothing personal.